Hi there, Lindy Goodall here. Embroidering on textured or furry fabrics like terry cloth and furs requires a little bit more prep before sending the design to your machine. In this video, I'll add a name to this stocking, add some mat down stitching, popularly known as knockdown stitching, and in another video, we'll hoop and stitch the stocking. I'll also cover a few other tips for monogramming stockings. I've placed my stocking on the screen as a background article. Hatch does come with various articles you can use like this, and you can even create your own. To do that, I've photographed the stocking, cleaned and sized it in Photoshop, and saved it as a PNG to a folder in the Hatch Pictures Articles folder. To get an article on the screen, make sure nothing is selected. Click on the background tool on the context bar, and go to Custom Article, or you can choose some of the included ones. Click Browse. And I've just created my own folder inside the Articles folder, which you can see is inside Hatch Pictures, inside Public Pictures. And these are all the ones I've added. Click the one you want, click Open, and then you would just click OK. Now normally I work in metric. I'm going to switch to US for just a moment. Press M on the keyboard, and I'm going to measure this cuff. And it's approximately 8 inches wide by 4 inches tall, which is the same size as my actual stocking that I'm going to be working on. Now I don't want to take this stocking apart to embroider on it, so I need to figure out how big a space that I can stitch on my machine. And it really is going to depend on what kind of hoops I have and what kind of machine I'm sewing on. So if I'm stitching on a flatbed machine, like a home embroidery machine, I'm going to have to smush this flat somehow. If I'm working on a tubular multi-needle machine, then I'll use different types of hoops and it'll go on the machine differently. Another thing I need to consider is, am I willing to take apart the stocking, embroider the name, and then sew it back together? And no, this is for my dog, so I'm not going to do that. So I've already figured this out. I'm going to sew this on my baby Localissimo, and I've determined that I can sew about a 4-inch wide area. So I'm just going to go back to metric. I've already selected my baby lock, and I'm going to turn on the hoop. And you can see that the hoop is actually in the middle of the area, which is not where I want my design, but we'll work with that. So I'm just going to move some ruler guides in here, like that. And then I'm going to turn off the hoop. Press B on the keyboard, and I'm going to zoom in up here. And I'm going to put some other ruler guides out like this. And I think that's a pretty good space for a name. Now it's not quite centered, but I'm not going to worry about that. I can adjust that when I actually go to sew it. So I'll go to the Lettering and Monogramming toolbox, click on Lettering, type in the name. There it is. It's kind of small. I think 30 millimeters should be about good. And I think I want a different font. That's a little basic. So I want to use a script font. And here's a cool thing that you can do in the font menu. I'm just pressing the down arrow key. And you can see that you can trial different fonts. Now I have a lot of fonts in here that you might not have, so don't worry about that. I'm going to go down here to Flare Script. This one looks pretty good. This one comes with Hatch, so you'll be able to use this one. What I like about it is that it has relatively bold strokes on here. You don't want something too thin like something on this furry cuff. Now we're going to deal with the fur after we get our lettering done, so hold on for that. Now I'm going to use a font called Typo Upright. And that's one I've created. It's in the shop. I'll put a link in the description down below. Now I want to move those letters a little closer together. Let's zoom in a little bit more. So I'll go down here and adjust my letter spacing. And let's see what happens if I do -2. Well, that looks pretty good. We'll go with that. So there's my lettering. Now we need to add that mat down stitching so that we can smush down all that fur, and our lettering will just lay on top of that and it will look nice and crisp. So with the lettering selected, go to the Create Layouts toolbox, Click on Create Outlines and Offsets. Make sure Object Outlines is unchecked. Check Offset Outlines. And set an offset of about 2, and we'll do an offset count of 3. Leave the type set at single run. I'm going to select this option for how to draw the outlines. We'll use this one for corners, and we'll include holes, and I'll click OK. Now, why did I put all of those on there? I really didn't know which one I wanted. So by choosing multiples, you can decide which one you really want to use. So now all I have to do is delete the ones I don't want. So we'll start with that little guy there. And I think that I just want this innermost one. Now an outline like this is not going to do much to mat down any nap you have. So we need to do a little bit more work. The cool thing about the Create Outlines tool is it creates a closed shape. And when you have a closed shape, you can make it either be a fill or an outline. So I'm going to do a little rearranging over here. I'm going to change this lettering to red, and I'm going to move it to the bottom so that these pieces will actually be sewing behind my lettering. And then I'll take all of these, change them to a filled object. Now I want to have cutouts in here. So I need to do a little bit more rearranging. So I'll send that to the top. Then I'm going to select these, and I'm going to use those as cookie cutters to cut out holes in that bottom fill. So we'll go to the Edit Objects toolbox. I'm going to right-click on Remove Overlaps, and I want to make sure that my overlap setting is set at 0. Now normally it's set at 1 because you do want to have some overlap if you're removing the under stitching so that you don't have too much bulk. But I want to have a total cutout here, so I'm going to leave it set at 0. Click OK, and now all I have to do is remove those, press the Delete key, and we have some little holes there. Now it didn't do that one, probably because it was just too small, and that's okay. Now this is a full solid fill in here. We don't want that. So I'll select that, change the spacing, and 1.2 should be good. And we'll go to Stitching, and remove the underlay. And we'll set that to white. Now normally when you do this sort of mat down stitching, you want this background stitching to be pretty much invisible. You want it to just be like a permanent topping on your terry cloth or your fur or whatever your fabric is, so that your top stitching will just sit up on top and the fur won't fall over the edges of your lettering. Now we haven't saved our design yet, so I'm just going to save it. Now we're not quite ready to send it to our machine yet. We want to do a few checks. So I'm going to turn off True View just by pressing T on the keyboard. And what I want to do is make sure that I don't have any satin stitches that are too long for my machine. Now this is still reasonably good sized lettering, so it shouldn't be a problem here, but it's always a good idea to check, especially in these longer areas. If you have dotted lines across here, that means it may not sew on your machine. So you'd want to do something like change the stitch type or turn on auto split. Now one more thing I like to do before I send it to my machine is to watch it sew in the stitch player. What I'm looking for here is it sewing in the right order. Does it look like it has all the pieces I want? Does it look like it's efficient? I'm also looking to see, does it have underlay? So this one has an edge walk and a zigzag underlay, so it keeps those letters nice and lofted, so they're very beautiful. So that's all looking good. Let's zoom out and see our whole stocking. So there's my design. My design is not centered in the work area. If we turn on a hoop, we can see that the hoop has now moved up here. Remember, it was down here. So it's still going to sew in the center of my hoop. Now one more thing I like to check is I'll go to Output Design, Auto Start and End, And I want to make sure that it's going to start in the center and end in the center. That way I can make sure my needle is aligned. Click OK. And now I'm ready to export for my machine. Be sure to save your EMB file. You want that EMB file because now that we have this all set up, we know where to position another name. So if I wanted to create another stocking, say for my cat Cisco, all I'd have to do is delete this background, change this text to Cisco, and then do the process of creating the outlines and offsets and making that background fill. So the next step is, how do we get this on our stocking? And we'll do that in another video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, please like, and please make a comment.